What's going on, folks? We're in the process of putting on a lower ball joint on this Ford vehicle. The first thing you gotta do, you want to take out the cotter pin that's on your actual axle that's holding in your nut that holds your axle in. So first thing you do, you want to pull that out, and then once you do that, you want to take off your actual nut that's holding on your rotor that goes onto your axle. Alright, we're in the process now of taking off the nut that actually goes on the axle. We put a little bit of oil on it to make it come off a little bit easier. We're about to be using the size 36 socket with a breaker bar. So you might want to use a breaker bar to make it a little bit easier to come off versus trying to use just a basic socket. So we're going to use a breaker bar to kind of turn it. Okay, yeah, that actually came off pretty easy. The oil is going to help also for it to come out pretty quick. And once you get that off, then we'll move to the next step. Alright, the next thing that we're about to do is take out the tire rod end, which is right down there. First you got to take out the cotter pin normally that's at the bottom of it. And once you get that off, you want to take the nut off that's on the bottom, which could be around an 18.
Yeah. 19.
Yeah, 18,
sometimes
19.
You got some good vice strips. Generally these things, once you break and lose their hand, you can pretty much, but make sure you get your vice strips good. Yeah. See how easy that was to turn?
Yeah, that's coming off.
You don't damage your nut. But you know, trying to run back and forth, you can pretty much unscrew these with your hand. Okay,
so we're taking off the tire rod, the outer tire rod right now, which is actually connected
kind of
to
leave your nut at the end. So
we got the bolt kind of loose on the outer tire rod end. You don't want to take the bolt all the way off yet. What you want to do is leave it kind of on the end like that, so you can hit it with the hammer and knock it out. We're about to do that now. We're taking a hammer.
This is spread out.
Yeah, we're going to just knock it.
Hit it right there.
Kind of want to hit it, and then you can knock it up like that. And now you got your bolt up, and your outer tire rod end is off. Now once you have that off, okay, now what we're doing is removing the caliper. There should be 2 screws, one at the bottom and one at the top. We already took the bottom one out. Now we'll take out the top one. Now we have that, you kind of want to wiggle it back and forth. So now that you have your caliper coming off, now you have your caliper off. And you want to put your caliper somewhere where it won't damage the brake line. Make sure you got it secure so it doesn't fall and damage your brake line.
Like that.
Now once you have your caliper off, now the next thing is, alright, now what we're doing is we're going to be taking off the caliper bracket, which should be 2 screws that you'll have to take out to remove that. There'll be one at the bottom
18.
and one at the top, which you'll probably need a size 18 on most vehicles to take this off. Alright, now we have the caliper bracket off. So what you should see is that now we can take off the rotor. See, we removed the rotor.
Come up here, disconnect.
Now you want to come up here and disconnect your ABS brake line.
Like that. Pull it loose.
Alright, so now we're about to remove the pin, the cotter pin, from the upper ball joint. Space just kind of want to wiggle it out like that. And once you got that pin out, next you want to take your vice grips again, or your socket set, whichever you have, and remove the nut that's on your upper ball joint. Now we have that off.
Your wire to the side, the bottom. Take your lower.
Next, what we're doing is removing the nut from the bottom ball joint. Pull out the cotter pin first. Alright, now that we got that pin out, next what we're going to do is go ahead and take off the bottom ball joint nut. Go ahead and remove the nut for the bottom ball joint. So now we have the top ball joint loose as well as the bottom ball joint loose. Alright, we're about ready to make it come down by hitting in the middle first.
Yeah, that
kind of push the axle out the way. All right.
Kind of move your ABS.
Yeah, you want to move everything out the way.
Out the way. You don't want to hit it
before you drop it.
Try to lock your brake line because it'll break here. But you want to hit that
you
right
want to
there.
hit right there in your ball joint. How it popped out. Your upper ball joint. Then you want to kind of pull it out of the top. Like that. Okay. Now that's the spin. The top part is spindle free. Now you come down to the bottom one. You want to knock that.
Put your thing out the way.
Yeah, move everything out the way.
If not, put a nut on there so they don't get hit and mess up your thread.
Then you want to hit the bottom like that until that comes free. Now if that one's out, now your spindle should be free. Wiggle it down, and now it's out. Now we're going to be taking out that bottom ball joint and putting a new one in. All right, we're in the process now of taking out the bottom ball joint. So it may be good to put a little bit of oil around it at the top to make it a little bit easier to come out. So we're putting a little bit of oil on top of it. All right, next we're just taking off the snap ring. Yeah, hold on, let me pull it off yet. Oh, you got it off? Hold on. Okay, we got the snap ring coming up. You kind of want to take some needle nose pliers and kind of open it and take like a screwdriver in the back of it and pull it back. Once you have that off, you want to get the oil kind of up underneath the top of the lower ball joint.
Take your oil fitting out.
Yeah, take off your oil fitting, which is at the top. You'll see a little thing sticking out. That's your oil fitting. You're not going to be using this one again because you're putting a new one in. So you may still not want to break it, but yeah, you take some vice grips or something just to pull that oil fitting out of it. Yeah, you want to, well, you're hitting the top first to kind of break it loose. Kind of want to, yeah, break it. See how it went down?
Then you got your socket.
Yeah. Now that you knocked it down, next what you want to use is a socket, which we're about to do now. Yeah, so what we just did was we hit it from the top down first, and now that we have it kind of went inside of her, now what we're going to use is a socket to hit it with to push it through. So you want to get a socket that basically is smaller than the top of the lower ball joint. That way you can push it all the way through the hole. Yeah, we're just putting it on top of it and hitting it like that. You're trying to punch it all the way through. There you go. See how it came out? So you're basically hitting it from the top down. And once you have that out, now you'll be ready to actually put in your new ball joint, lower ball joint. Alright, now that we're about ready to press the new ball joint in, first thing we want to do is kind of jack up. We're jacking up the lower control arm. So it's up a little bit higher to make it easier to put to press in the new lower ball joint. So we're just jacking up the lower control arm with a jack. Always make sure you use safety, use jack stands to hold the vehicle up. You don't really want to do work like this, just having it sitting on a jack by itself. So always use like your jack stands to hold it up. So what we're doing now is raising up the lower control arm enough to where we could actually press in the new lower ball joint. See, we stuck it in from the bottom, kind of putting it in some. Just kind of want to hit it in from the bottom up. So now we're hitting it up in like that. So you want to get it up to where you see that groove, because that's where you're going to be putting that ring back onto that, which stops it from coming out. So now that we have it like that, the next thing we're going to do is put the ring on it. Now you should have one that comes with your new ball joint that you want to put in over the top. You see that little groove right there? That's where the ring goes in at the bottom. Like that, you just want to open it up. Yeah, open it up with a pair of needle nose. And get it over the top. And once you got over the top, you just want to press it all the way down, make sure it snaps in to place. That's what actually keeps your lower ball joint from coming back out. You want to make sure it's all the way down. And once you have it like that, pretty much you're done putting in your new lower ball joint. Now you want to put in your valve, your grease fitting into the top of your new one. Basically just screws into the top. You want to make sure also that you put some grease inside of it. So sometimes if you don't have like a grease gun to shoot it in, you may want to try to get a little bit of grease inside of it before you put the valve on. Just kind of let it go down inside the hole that's on top of your lower ball joint. And basically once you have this done, you're pretty much done putting on your lower ball joint. Now you just got to go back and put back on the pieces that you took off. Okay, so now we're about to put the spindle back on.
Axle going in.
First you want to put your axle into the middle. And then you kind of want to see how it would line up at the bottom into the new lower ball joint. You want to get that to come in and kind of take a nut and put it at the bottom to kind of hold it in. Once you have it up in there, you want to get that nut at the bottom and put that out, actually help it to stay up while you connect it back onto the top ball joint. The first thing we did was put the axle back in. Now that we got a nut at the bottom, now what you're doing is coming to the top one. Alright, so we're putting in the top ball joint now. We're using a jack to actually jack up the lower control arm to actually make it easier for you to get everything together. It's kind of hard kind of hold up the whole spindle without it. So now we kind of have it up. We're kind of, all you want to do is just kind of, yeah, just kind of push it in like that. And once you push it down, you can take your nut and put it at the bottom. And once you have that nut on, you also don't forget to put in your cotter pins that actually belong in the bottom and the top. On both of your ball joints, you need to have a cotter pin that protects it from basically coming loose while you're driving. So now we're going to go ahead and tighten up the top, the upper ball joint. And when you do that, it's going to actually pull up your whole spindle up toward the top. See how it's coming up? It's going to close that gap.
And make sure you align your holes.
And make sure you got it aligned right so you could put the actual cotter pin back in it. Now you want to stick the cotter pin back in. Alright, now what we're doing is repositioning our jack on the other side of the lower control arm so we can go ahead and bolt up the bottom, so we can go ahead and bolt up the actual bottom nut on the lower ball joint. That's what we're doing now, is putting that one back in. And once you get that one in, you want to put in your cotter pin also at the bottom. Alright, now that we have the lower and the upper ball joint back in, with the bolts are back on it and the cotter pin, next you want to do is put on your axle nut. So now we're about to tighten up our axle nut. Once you have your axle nut back on, then you want to put back on your caliper bracket, which goes right in those two holes you see right there. So next, what we're about to do now is put on our rotor. You want to put your rotor back on. So before you actually put back on your outer tire rod, go ahead and put back on your rotor and then put back on your caliper bracket. So you want to take the 2 screws to hold your caliper bracket on and put that back on. You actually want to save putting on your actual outer tire rod to last. It'll just make it easier. So go ahead and put your caliper bracket back on, which takes 2 screws, one at the top and one at the bottom.
There to catch it.
Okay, now we're tightening up our caliper bracket.
Use a breaker bar about like that when you do that too.
Yeah, you want to make sure that's nice and tight. Now that you have that on, you want to put something inside of your rotor to hold your rotor from moving as you tighten back up. See how I locked it right there against the caliper bracket? Now since you have that locked, you'll be able to tighten back up your nut that goes on your axle itself. So basically when you're putting it back on, the order you would want to do is first you would want to put on your bottom ball joint, then you want to put on your top ball joint. After you do that, what you want to do is put your rotor back on, then put on your caliper bracket back on. And once you have that, you want to tighten up
about 100 pounds.
Yeah, you want to tighten up the nut that goes onto your axle itself. And once you have that back on, once you have all that back on, the next thing that you would want to do is make sure you put your cotter pin back into your axle itself. And once you put your cotter pins back in, always remember you stick them through and you open them back up on the other side. Sometimes people just stick them through and think it's it. No, you got to run it through. Then you want to split the other sides like rabbit ears. You want to open it up. Yeah, once you put your cotter pin in, what you want to do now is just bend that the other side. And you want to split that open like that. Basically like TV antennas. You want to open it to make it hard for it to come back out. And now that you have that done,
put your brake pieces back on.
Now what you want to do is put back on your brake pieces if they came loose off of your actual caliper mount. And once you've done that, normally you'll be able to now drop the jack that you're using to hold up your lower control arm. And once you have that done, you normally want to go ahead on and put your brake pads back into. Yeah, now you want to go ahead and put your brake pads back into your caliper mount. And so now we're putting back on the caliper itself, which takes 2 screws. And once you do that, you want to come over here and put back in your outer tire rod. All right, now that we got the rotor, the caliper back on, now we're just plugging back up the ABS. So if you disconnected the ABS line, go ahead and plug that back up. And once you have that back up and back into position, now what you want to do next is you're going to come down, you want to turn your wheel out, and now what you're going to be doing is putting back in your outer tire rod. I also have a video up showing how to disconnect your outer tire rod also. So you just want to stick it back inside of that hole where it came out from, take your nut, put it back on at the bottom, take your cotter pin and stick that back in, and then pretty much you're done. Make sure that before you drive the vehicle, that you always pump your brakes, because you did take off all your brake parts like your caliper, your rotor, and brake pads. So sometimes you may not have brakes when you first get into your vehicle. All right, folks, once again, this is how you would change out your lower ball joint on any vehicle pretty much. All right, please subscribe and check out our other videos. Thanks.